Okay, we're going to get back to it now that Mr. Poole has arrived. I'll just wait till everybody's taken a seat. Right. Quentin, you're up. We just had a you're on at 12?
12:30. Email was. My first email.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
So am I. Never mind.
Are you ready?
Yeah,
you
I'm ready as ever.
Thank you.
Well, I'm thrilled to see you're still awake. You've done bloody well. Actually, I've been watching it this morning, and I thought there's some really intriguing options come up. My first thing was, talking about governance versus advice and advocacy. You've had a lot of advice from staff, but basically, unfortunately, the KCDC staff have represented the same advice that was proffered in 2021. And that is a real problem, I think, going forward. So we've got to get out of that. We've got also a conundrum with what happens with the referendum of the Maori wards. So that's twisting things around a bit too. It doesn't matter where you sit on that. It's a given, you're going for it. So either you change the boundaries and go automatically to the Electoral Commission, or you don't. And I suggest you don't, because we've got to have one after the Maori wards, because I suspect people who, if the Maori ward gets in, I think the first thing people will do is object on the representation numbers, because it's so much under. It's 4,900 versus 8,000 in numbers. So the numbers for the Maori ward, as suggested, and I think it could even be lower, is 4,900 on the Maori ward, yep, compared to 8,600, 700, whatever it is. So could be a problem there. So let's try and save money from us, but also look at the future. We do not need the unnecessary costs imposed on us by going straight to the Electoral Commission on this at this stage. We can get out of it. And I think that is what you guys have got to weigh up. Whether, is it worthwhile fiddling, and that's all it is a tiny bit of fiddling, or do you look at doing a proper job next time round? And I think the staff can be helped. I've seen this morning quite a few interesting conceptual ideas that could be useful in the future and be explored. Whether they come to fruition is a different matter. But I think we should be looking at it as an area, as Kapiti. And also, it's depending also on the referendum, whether it's yes, no, on the Maori ward seat. So, we've got all these moving parts. So, I suggest you guys reject their staff proposal for moving the Waikanai-Otaki boundaries south, because it's going to cost us money by automatically going to the Local Government Commission for a determination. So we retain the current Waikanai boundary, which is the simple way, or we move it to the Otaki River boundary, which means that you're not in that conundrum of having communities separated by a roadway. And that's the other way of utilising the mesh blocks, I would suggest. And I would think that would have a useful way of getting through it. I was also intrigued with Chris Mitchell's thoughts this morning. One thing he didn't bring up was that there is another physical boundary now imposed on Kapiti, and that's the expressway. And that is another way we can look at possibly driving wards. In 2021-22, when I was presenting, I suggested we looked at beach wards because of the common interest there with climate change and problems derived to the beach, which are completely separate from other wards. We have seen it in Waikanae, with the 2 ward councillors this time. Luckily, we voted one from the top end of town and one from the lower end of town, and it's worked out very, very well. It's been a great thing. So that moved on to community boards, doesn't it? I'm intrigued that you have 2 councillors on Paraparaumu, but only one on Waikanae. You had the opportunity to do it, but nothing actually happened. Why? I suggest, we need, because there's a separation in community interests in Waikanae at this stage, and while Waikanae is 1 ward only, that we should have the 2 councillors there to give the different opinions, because one councillor cannot represent the whole area, and that's what we found prior to 2021-22. And that's why we were so adamant that we had to have 2 councillors, and it's helped us a hell of a lot. I've been really appreciative of that manoeuvre. So I support the current ward model with the northwards boundaries. I do not support the creation of a Maori ward, because what it is confirming power to Mana Whenua, not to Maori. And I make that really, I've had a long time, I was clerking on the Waitangi Tribunal for 15 years, and I saw it there. So what you're doing is going back to a feudal system, which the Pākehā of this world will remember. I am perturbed what it is going to do. You had the option, the third option, of going and actually having, instead of creating a Maori ward seat, creating a referendum at the next election to say whether the community wanted a Maori ward. Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you actually trust the people? Because that's who you're meant to represent. So you've created a Maori ward, okay. The other figures, and I've alluded to them already this morning, is that the vote in a Maori ward on the figures shows that a Maori ward vote is worth double of any other ward, any other voter. So is that democratic? In other words, you're giving extra power to a group of people based on race only, and actually based on tribe, not even race. It's tribe you're basing it on. So that's a real problem, I feel. I have talked about the boundaries, and I think that is the important thing. I think my personal opinion on Maori wards doesn't matter. You've got one created. Let it lie, and we'll see what comes. So anyway, it's my submission.
I think your final statement on Māori wards was pretty spot on. Yeah, we've made the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, today's not really about that, but I am
Gotcha.
interested in questions on your other points that you raised today. And first up, we have Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora, Quentin. Thank you, and thank you for your written submission as well. Sorry, it is a question in relation to the Māori ward, but I'll just make it quick and I'll make it just the one. You mentioned that it's potentially quite, I can't remember the exact word you used, but concerning that we would or we have voted to affirm our Māori ward, it would potentially be constituted at the next election pending the results of the referendum, which it now looks like we're legally bound to do, but we'll be seeking advice on that. What do you think, and Councillor Wilson asked this of us a minute earlier, so you may have heard the question already, what do you think is to be afraid of if we have a Māori ward councillor at the table, acknowledging that council already has relationships with the three mana whenua iwi of the Kāwhiri Rohi, and those relationships are existing and strong and ongoing. What are we afraid of around having a Māori ward councillor sitting at our table feeding into decisions?
Well, for one thing, as a Maori, I'm appalled that you are making a racist determination. I'm absolutely appalled. I was a member of the executive of HEART, who stood out against anti-apartheid movement. And this is creating an anti-apartheid movement within New Zealand. This is what you're doing. You know, it is frightening. I am glad to say my iwi, not one member is on the Maori ward, on Maori electoral roll. We all stand on the general roll because we think we are one people in New Zealand. And this is what the treaty means. We are one people. We are not divisive, and we are not giving certain rights or extra rights to one group of people, whether they're Maori, Indian, Chinese, Pākehā, anything. You've got to treat everyone equally.
Thank you, I think that.
Yeah, I mean, we have been discussing Māori wards this morning, so let's just keep doing that, eh? Mike Moore?
Thank you, Quinton. I'm going to bring it back to boundaries now. So I'm advocating and a supporter of in terms of the Otaki and Waikanae, what you alluded to, that if there is any move, that a natural delineation may well be the Otaki River. I want to talk about just something else. I'll ask you something else, your views on. There's talks about, councillor representation on community boards. Another councillor sitting around this table would advocate that councillors probably should not be, or be secondary to the elected members from the community on community boards. I just wonder if you have a view on that.
So what you're suggesting is they sit on the board, but they don't have a voting right. Is that something what you're
No,
saying?
no. The way I would interpret it is that the community boards are elected from the community. They are separate to the elected councillors who serve on different roles around this table. So the community board is just that, a board elected from the community.
After watching the community boards operate over a number of years, I think it has been advantageous having the councillors sitting there. They can sometimes add to a discussion because they know the background a lot better than the community board members. You know, the great thing I've been impressed in the last few years is more community board members around here.
Yeah.
And that has been a great change. You know, back 2005, 2006, we never saw a community board member here.
I think the appreciation of that should be levelled at this mayor who's elevated us to the table.
Yeah. It's great. Great to see. But so I think it's up to you guys to work that through. I personally think that there is value in having councillors at the community board table.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Just one.
Especially as now as they're ward councillors, they have got their community at heart. That's it. Yeah.
I can't claim credit for elevating community board members to this esteemed table. That would be
Grab it.
Jenny Rowan who did that, I think, back in the day. And I remember Adrian Webster attending every single meeting and hearing and everything. Philip Edwards after him. So, yeah, but we've had great engagement this term from the community board members, and I really appreciate that. And having them with voting rights on subcommittees has been really fantastic too. So, but that's off topic a little bit, so I'll go to B.
Okay, going back to the Otaki boundary. I think realistically, if I was in your shoes, I would retain the status quo. So you're not creating a problem up that end at this stage for the Local Government Commission. I have not even profited an argument as regards your problems down the southern end of town here. I think that, if you can work your way through that and get away without any cost going to forcing a hearing on the community, great. If you can't, so be it. It's just another cost. We've got 280,000 extra for a referendum we've got to find. So, things are going to be tight in this council, as far as I can see.
So there are a couple more questions. Are you up for it?
Go for
I'm
it.
guessing you are.
Yeah.
Mr. Larissy.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. Sticking to the Māori ward questions, because it seems to be a popular topic. So you made a comment, I'm just really interested in it, because it kind of is contrary to what I think the conversations that I've been part of has kind of stated. So you made the comment that Māori ward, I think you said it favours mana whenua. The conversations that I've been in, I've heard say that our current structure favours iwi through Te Whakamanenga, and that having the Māori ward allows the voice of non-iwi Māori or Mātua Waka Māori to be engaged in the representative process. So I am interested to hear why you think the Māori ward favours mana whenua, because that's an interesting comment.
I think, idealistically, I think your last statement was correct, is that you're hoping you will get the urban Maori, the disaffiliated Maori involved. In fact, you won't, because the iwi is strong, and the iwi is tribal, and the iwi is controlled at the top level. It is not a democratic society as we know it. So, you're working with two different systems, really, is the way I see it. And that what came through in the Waitangi Tribunal every time we had hearings. It was fascinating. There was a few judges there who, when things were appealed from the Waitangi Tribunal to the Maori Land Court, wow, it was interesting watching what happened.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Quentin. I'm one of the councillors who don't think councillors should be on the community board. It doesn't mean I don't think councillors shouldn't be at the community board. I think absolutely they should be at the community board. But I think councillors, it's easy for councillors to have a disproportionate say, for the very reason that you said, that quite often councillors are in possession perhaps of more information than community board members might be, just because of the different roles. But anyway, leaving that one aside, the Te Horo, I'm agnostic on that, north or south. It's up to Te Horo people. But the question, and we had a conversation about this. I was just wondering if we go status quo, if council says it's a status quo situation, that it doesn't require local government commission involvement. And that cost, but I'm not sure what level that cost might be to council if we were to status quo versus there being a hearing. I'm not quite sure what that cost would be, and maybe that's a conversation that we have at some stage. If it's only a marginal, if it's marginal, so. Just on the boundary, as opposed to tinkering, you favour going to the river, and you're going to the river coming south, or to the river going north from Waikanae River.
No, I was talking about the Otaki River.
Yeah. No, I figured you were.
There's a couple of interesting things there. First of all, I have no problems with councillors speaking at community board meetings as long as they're concise, Nigel.
Not pointing at anyone.
I've been watching you this morning. I think it's really important that things are solved at the community board, and if extra information can be brought immediately to the table, it should be. And for that reason, I think councillors do or should have knowledge and be able to bring it to the table and progress a conversation, a discussion through a lot quicker, rather than fluffing around, having to spend time going back to staff or going back to councillors and finding out. So I think that is why I think that they're a good conduit. The interesting thing, and Pat talked about your survey, and I've got a couple of real problems with your survey. One of the questions is actually legally wrong. Number 7. There are options. According to the Act, I checked the Act and it was wrong. So be careful of that survey. But anyway, reading through the things, I couldn't find anyone from Te Horo really wanting to change out or in. There was a couple of discussions either side of the argument, but there wasn't anything that stood out. So I would suggest you've got basically a mandate to do nothing. Get some more information ready for next time, and do the next time thoroughly. If it is Te Horo wants to stay with Otaki, okay, we've got to look at changing the boundary elsewhere to keep Waikanae up, or to make Waikanae even smaller down to one councillor, which is what part you knock off the beach, for instance, Waikanae Beach, off Waikanae. It's going to be an interesting conundrum, next time sorting it out, but you have got a range of options for that area. I cannot speak for the southern end. I have not studied it, and so I will not go there.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Quentin, for coming along, speaking today, and for your submission. Like you, a lot of the presenters, all the presenters today have raised some really interesting questions or points, and they've been followed up by a range of questions. So my first question is probably more of a generic one in relation to how this council not only does the surveys, but the questions that are in the survey. So in the first instance, and I suppose then how we interpret those surveys. So you made the comment that we should trust our community, and particularly with the Maori ward, so that was against having a Maori ward, and yet this council said yes to that. Questions have been raised around the type of questions that are actually asked, and which potentially doesn't give the best information for what we're wanting to do. So what is your view on ensuring that our surveys are more fit for purpose?
Well, this current survey, I was appalled to find my survey results went straight in as a submission. It wasn't intended as a submission. It didn't say anything about being a submission. It said it was a survey. And within half a day of sending in my survey results, I got a thing, thank you for your submission. Now that is wrong. I subsequently wrote my submission and put it in and asked for the other one to be withdrawn because it was not a submission. That's number one. So there's a whole raft of things going on within the staff that I'd be worried about as councillors. I've seen it time and time again with your surveys. They're either too broad and not definitive enough. And, to my mind, the thing of bringing in the Maori ward on this survey was ridiculous. It was already done and dusted. You had made a decision. Why survey it, resurvey it, and relitigate it? We didn't need it. You'd made a decision. Whether you agree with it or not is a different matter. But, let's find the information that you want and you need, rather than going out and into the wilderness and trying to pick cherries off every damn tree. Also, check the accuracy of what is being what the question states. I think that is a real problem. I think I've written in this is the third submission in a row I've mentioned survey results or survey questions that are incorrect from this council. No, there is a problem.
Thank you for that. So my next line of questioning relates to the boundary location between Waikanae and Otaki. I suppose my view in some respects is as long as those constituents are being well represented, it shouldn't actually matter. I think there's a lot of hang-ups about boundaries, and up through that area there's lots of boundaries,
Is
whether
there a
it's the police.
question here? We're not
Yes, there is.
debating.
I'm just following on what other councillors have done around the table this morning. Thank you.
And I have called them on it every time.
Okay. So then, cutting to the chase, based on the information that we have been provided as a result of an Information Act request, the boundary has been suggested to be moved north based on one written submission. How do you consider that to be an appropriate way to run a survey or to ask the questions? So one of the submitters did an Information Act request to find out whether Te Horo residents wanted the boundary moved, stayed the same or further north. There was only one person who actually made a submission on that, and that is and council staff have used that as their starting position.
Well, I think the answer is pretty obvious. We've all seen, I think we do get hung up about boundaries a bit too much in local body. Basically, we're in the Kapiti community. Let's look at that for a start. If you're interested in local body affairs, you tend to get to know most councillors over a period of time. If you're interested, they seem to answer the phone, seem to answer emails. I talk to you occasionally on the street. So I don't think there is a major problem with your local community. There's more a bigger hang-up, a national boundary thing. It's really important. But when we're meant to be apolitical here, as regards basically not really having a political stance, but we're working for the community, I don't think boundaries matter as much. Okay, if you get, I always remember when the Waikanae Community Board and the Waikanae wards were different, the boundaries were different. Complete aberration, I thought. But anyway, did it matter? I think it did for Rikarangi.
Yeah.
And, we worked hard to try and get them back in, and we have. But, it didn't make any sense when that was working. I don't think the Rikarangi people actually were disenfranchised, were not looked after by the council. So, is there a problem?
Okay, thank you for that. My last area of questioning is around having 2 ward councillors being appointed to the Waikanae Community Board. So we have 2 ward councillors in Waikanae. Currently we have 1 person who is appointed to that community board. I totally agree that it is the role of well, one of the roles is to be a conduit as a ward councillor between the community board and council and the community. If, well, at present, I suppose I'm not appointed to the community board, and I try and well, I go to the community board meetings and I take my role, do my role, whatever it is. But do you think that if a person is not appointed to a community board as a ward councillor, that they should act as if they are, or they should just act as a ward councillor?
I don't think
separate?
that's really within the scope of this.
I think it is.
Survey.
I think it could be.
It's about behaviour of councillors.
No.
It
It's
is in fact
appointment.
outside the scope of this, because what we're talking about is the representation arrangements.
Okay.
How the people then enact those roles is another question.
Yeah. I think
Well, I suppose if I can just make one more comment, is that there are also noises that I've heard that, so I can sit at the table now, I'm also hearing that may be taken away as well. So I'm just
So,
interested in
Councillor
your comment.
Provanoff, I don't want to go down this road anymore. We're going to stick to what the submissions are about, which is about the representation arrangements.
okay.
So whether or not the person sits at the table, and whether they're, whether we have 2 appointed members or 1 appointed member or no appointed members, let's just stick to that, if that's okay.
I think it's something that could be. If we go to the local government commission, it is something that will have to be addressed. Though the interesting thing is, I understand with Pauparam we've got 3 ward councillors, but only 2 on the thing. When you actually start delving into it, the whole thing looks a bit messy. I thought the interesting thing, I remember last time Dale talking about it and saying, yes, we could have 2 Waikato councillors, and I thought, oh, well, it's going to happen. When it didn't happen, I was a bit interested why it didn't happen, so be it. So I think, if we do go to the local government commission, yes, I think it's something we have to address, but I think we address it for the entire community. We don't look at one-offs. Try and get something that works for the entire community.
I think that's the whole idea of this process, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so that's a discussion we need to have, Councillor Provanoff, and it's good to have brought it up today and be discussing it. Have you got any further questions
Oh,
before
no,
I go
thank
to
you.
Martin?
No, thank you, Quentin.
Thank you. Councillor Halliday. He's online. He's not well.
Kia Quentin. You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Thanks, Martin.
Fantastic. I've got a few questions and some clarity, but hopefully we're relatively straightforward. I'm just taking up a little bit on what Beat was referring to, but you talked to conferring power to mana whenua, not Māori, and I do appreciate the words you were saying around the Waitangi Tribunal. But you're correct, that's an iwi and Crown construct, not a general Māori construct. And also clarifying that iwi do have a operational relationship currently with council as well. My question is, do you not feel that it would depend on who stands for the ward with regards to what the representation will be? Or do you honestly think that mana whenua will put somebody up and will completely skew this vote? Considering mana whenua are a minority in the numbers of registered Māori on the Kapiti Coast.
Hey, do you want me to talk idealistically or practically?
Practically, please.
Well, it's pretty obvious. The iwi would control.
Interesting. That's an interesting point of view. No, that's fine. You've answered that.
I think the other
could I-
interesting thing, Martin, that you should also be considering with the creation of the Maori ward, what do you do with the unelected representatives of the iwi you've got on council?
That's a separate question, Quentin. I do agree that it does need to be discussed.
Yeah.
We are due for that discussion sometime soon. But it's a very, very valid question. Next question. You talked in your submission to the democratic law in regards to the survey done. I'm just curious, how is this democratic law when a survey is not binding?
Pardon, could you repeat the question?
Sure. In your submission, you talked to democratic law regards to the survey that was done. This was the first survey that was done with regards to Māori wards. I'm to ask a question: how is this democratic law when the survey's not binding?
Well, it was such an overwhelming majority going in one way that it should, either you disregard the entirety of the results, but you do not pick and choose the results out of it, Martin. And that's what's happened.
I appreciate that, but you referred to democratic law. I just was quite surprised that you were quite adamant that there's democratic law involved here in a non-binding survey. I'm under the impression that's not the case.
No, well, if I wrote democratic law, I was obviously having a flight of fancy as normal.
Okay, appreciate your candor that was incorrect. Okay, could I ask for some clarity, please, from council officers on some of your points? You talked to the numbers for the Māori board as being suggested at 4,900. Can I have confirmation from council officers that that's not a suggested figure? That's actually the figure on the Māori roll and is a specific figure?
I think we'll provide that offline, Martin.
Oh, I thought it would have been a relatively simple question for Dale to answer.
We'll get that to you later.
I think it came out of the 2018 survey, and it has been adjusted from stats department, hasn't it? That's where those figures came from.
Yeah, but they're quite specific.
So what we're doing today is we're hearing from submitters, and we're asking the submitters questions to clarify points in their submissions. We're not here to have a general debate and ask staff questions about the whole process.
Well, sorry, Madam Chair.
We've strayed a little bit today, but
on things that people submit, that there was a suggestion here that these figures are suggested figures. They're made up figures. I'm trying to clarify that they're not.
Okay, that's
pretty simple. My next question then is, I'd like to clarify.
I think, Martin, I take umbrance at your suggestion of mine saying that they were deduced figures.
Well, that's what you said. But anyway, that's fine. I don't think I heard wrong, but that's fine. If I can get some clarity, the cost of the, if this goes to the commission, it's not a cost borne by council, is that correct? It's not a cost borne by the ratepayer? It's a cost to central government, is that correct? That's the council officers?
So the cost of when all representation reviews go to the, was that in Quentin's submission? Was that in your submission? Was that in Quentin's submission, Martin?
That was in the questions that were just asked. There was asked for clarity whether it was stated that it would be costing council money for the...
yeah, I said that, yes.
Yeah, so I'm just clarifying that's not the case. It doesn't cost council money in relation to that. So if this goes back for determination?
Surely it does, because you've got quite considerable amount of staff time, Martin, dealing with it. If I recall, I think it's funded initially by Internal Affairs.
Yes,
am I right?
Okay, that's fine.
Darren, can you help?
I think, yeah.
I think it's done by Internal Affairs. Do you...
Martin, this is a formal council meeting where you're here to ask questions of the submitters. I'm quite happy to provide you information offline, but staff are not here to answer questions.
Okay, no troubles at all. Thank you for the clarity.
Yeah,
then I'll just, in relation to, this is another clarity one, but Quentin, I just wanted to clarify from my perspective then, that it wasn't council's decision not to have two councillors at the Waikanae Community Board. That was a determination from the commission as such. That wasn't a decision we made. But I
quite agree.
Yeah. So,
and I think it was a slip up that we all made.
No, we didn't make it, Quentin. The commission made it. That was something that was the commission came back to us and said that's what they determined is going to happen. We tried to push back against that, and we didn't get that they wouldn't change their mind, which was very unfortunate. And just clarifying another point from my perspective. The reason why there are only two councillors on the community board for Parapara Umu is because you can't have more than a 50% representation of councillors on a community board versus community board members. In other words, 3 would distort that, and not so much in Waikanae, but definitely in Paraparaumu. That's why we only have 2, because that's all we're allowed to do. Other than that, thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Quentin.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Janet.
it.
Goodbye.
I have a point to correct Martin on, if I may. The determination was actually silent on the number of ward councillors to be appointed to the Waikanae Community Board.
That's not my recollection from the discussion I had online with them when we discussed it with
It's
them.
actually reading the document.
Okay, we'll look into that. Aaron Packard, thanks for your patience. Sorry we're running late.
Right.
Welcome.
Kia ora. Ina kai konihara, tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi kia koutou. He mihi tēnei ki ngā mana whenua o te rohi, ko Aaron Packard ahau, ko te Paradise o Raumati South, taku kainga noho. I'm a stepfather, father, and also a local member of a lively group of dads, and we spread across Raumati Beach and Raumati South, and we share in the dad life together, engage our kids on outings, and tend to just have a lot of fun. So I do want to join in the exciting topic of the day, if I may give my 10 cents, about Māori ward representation, and as per my submission, I support and acknowledge the Council's commitment to the Māori ward establishment. There's an important, albeit relatively small step toward honouring Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and I think our district will benefit from it, although some may not realise it. I have spent most of the past 3 years as a senior advisor to the Chief Human Rights Commissioner at Te Kahui Tika Tangata, the Human Rights Commission. Although today I'm speaking in my personal capacity. So as you may imagine, the issue of representation came up frequently in my time at the Human Rights Commission, and so I thought I would highlight 5 or 6 points just around that. And so when we talk about human rights in Aotearoa New Zealand, we're not just talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was signed after World War II, or the International Bill of Rights, which was subsequently developed, but we're also crucially talking about Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which is undoubtedly the first human rights document in Aotearoa, and furthermore the precursor to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, He Whakaputanga, the Declaration of Independence, should also be taken as a clear signal of Māori sovereignty. So it's in this context that, and including the 4 articles of Te Tiriti, which must be the starting point for our understanding of our democracy and indeed the trajectory of where council should be heading. So in this light, establishing a Māori ward consisting of 1 seat amongst 10, as I understand it, is consistent but also far short of what Te Tiriti o Waitangi promises. Indeed, if we were to be seeking truly to be consistent with Te Tiriti, would have a system of democracy that sufficiently allowed for the 2 parties to Te Tiriti to make decisions akin to an equal footing. So we'd envision something much bolder. I would also highlight that the establishment and continuation of a Māori ward is consistent with the International Bill of Rights and other human rights law which New Zealand is committed to. This includes the recognition of the rights of Māori as Indigenous peoples, as explicitly supported through the various articles of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. There's a whole range of other countries that have governance arrangements similar, but in many ways more advanced than what we're discussing today. These include Norway, Finland, Sweden, Canada, and the United States, just to name a few. And I'll just add a further comment because I think it's relevant relating to another aspect of human rights. which is in both international law and our domestic law, including the New Zealand Bill of Rights and the Human Rights Act, which makes allowances for special measures. This is essentially preferential treatment of a population group who may be disadvantaged groups or a group that has experienced historic discrimination in order to achieve the key goal of equality. And indeed, this is the notion behind equity. So we've got to support all people to get where we're going. And so I just say this to ensure that the council can confidently make decisions that support the dignity for all people in the district, even if they draw heated political rhetoric or attention from some corners. So I think, with the decision around the Māori ward, you stand on firm ground, and we all have further to go. And lastly, I think this is just good for us. My family is richer for living in a district that properly acknowledges both the rights of and the massive contribution that tangata whenua make to our district and across the country, culturally, for our taiao, our prosperity, and our own sense of nationhood. Ngā mihi nui. Kia koutou.
Thank you very much. What a great way to end the day. Thank you. I've got questions first of all, from Councillor Coe.
Thank you for a very erudite submission. You're by far the youngest presenter we've had this morning. Do you consider, you might not consider yourself young, but relatively speaking. And I'm just, I guess, my thinking is that there's a generational issue here. And over the back there, we have our generation chair, which represents future generations, what they might think. And one of the notable features of the submissions we had previously on the issue of the Māori ward is there were differing views between younger people and older people, but as we know, younger people don't tend to become engaged by way of submissions or surveys and that kind of thing. So I'm just really wanting to explore your point of view as a relatively younger member of our community. Do you feel this is a factor that we need to consider, that really what we're doing is making a decision for future generations, and there is a different view between generations?
Oh, I think that's undisputably a key aspect to consider. And we did a survey at the Human Rights Commission around Te Tiriti and trying to understand what people's aspirations are around it and understanding and level of awareness. And there is just, about a third of the population have read Te Tiriti itself. So there is a lack of genuine knowledge and understanding about, not just about Te Tiriti, but the historical events that happened around that time in the decades subsequent to the signing of Te Tiriti. And so I think education is one part, but also it's become very politicized. And one aspect of the survey, the poll we did was showed that people want less political rhetoric and more just like good conversation about Te Tiriti. So any ways that the council can support just like constructive conversations, I think is really useful. And when it's framed in that sort of positive way, like most people were on board with it, but as soon as you drop in words like co-governance, it's like,
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, fact rather than narrative, eh? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I just want to say I accept your view that that a Māori ward is a small step. From some submitters, you would think we're organising the revolution just by having another voice at the table. My question was going to be along the same lines about the number of young people who have a completely different view from some of my constituents in Waikanae, but in order to get this thing across the line in terms of a referendum, because there's going to be one, we know that, unless we decide to become, what's that term we're going to be, Sophie? Yeah.
Oh, active
Pākehā activists. and just reject the idea out of hand of a referendum. But assuming that there is going to be one, we've heard that council needs to be as much as possible agnostic in terms of its public approach. Just running A, if you agree with that concept, and B, wherever these issues have come up before, you've had the likes of Hobson's Pledge, who have got loads and loads of money and take full-page ads in newspapers and stuff. So in order to get balance in a debate, which is what it will be, have you got any? Will you be involved in that sort of thing? Do you know groups that would be?
Yeah, and I think ultimately, the more face-to-face conversations people can have that just are a friendly face talking about it. And I think the value council can bring is sharing the value that having that existing relationship with mana whenua has had, and just talking about the benefits and how this will take it an extra step. Because, talking about rights is good, but it also can get very like my rights versus your rights and yada yada, and quite adversarial. When actually, human rights are about relationships, responsibilities, and human rights. So, yeah, I think it will. I know people in the community who are gearing up to just have those conversations and organising. But yeah, it will be an interesting time, and I think we need wise heads who can just be like, we're here for everyone, and we also have to look at what the law says, what our history has told us, and find ways to move forward in a good way.
Great, thanks, mate.
Great. Councillor Handford?
Yeah, kia ora, Erin. Thank you so much for your submission and also for coming down to share your thoughts. And appreciate the human rights lens that you've brought to this conversation. I'm wondering whether you have thoughts on sort of the central government overreach that's now playing into this Māori Ward conversation, when council made a decision, and so did many councils around the country, and a huge majority of which have just reaffirmed that decision. How does that place central government in terms of recognising the inherent rights of Māori as Indigenous peoples, but also the human rights that they have as people as well? And I wonder if there is, what your thoughts are on that as number one. And then secondly, a few submitters have suggested that council actively undertakes to find out the implications of not doing a binding referendum, and whether there are any loopholes that we can use to actually, because it's also been raised that for a Māori Ward councillor to be elected at this next election at the same time as this binding referendum is potentially happening, how that would feel for that person to then sit through their term. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, broadly central government's approach to acknowledging human rights in this context, and also then, whether that concerns you, and sort of how council then progresses to stand up in the face of that and investigate all practicable options. Yeah, well, the former chief commissioner who I worked with, Paul Hunt, always sort of told this analogy of, the successive New Zealand governments would go off to New York or Geneva and sign up to the various UN conventions, and then somewhere over the South Pacific they would have a sudden attack of amnesia, and by the time they landed in Wellington, they'd sort of forgotten what they'd signed up to. And so in reality, a lot of the human rights instruments that we are internationally obligated to do not filter down into much domestic actual legislation. So there are, obviously the Bill of Rights has a bunch, but it also doesn't include all the rights. And I'm no legal expert, so I wouldn't want to advise whether there's a specific case to take there against the government, although clearly they are undermining Indigenous rights very obtusely.
And I mean, I think the one of the ways that the working at the Human Rights Commission probably changed me was just feeling like we just need to have transparent conversations, and sometimes, it'd be better for the council to show as a united force, saying like, we're not afraid of the public having this conversation. We understand it's sort of in motion, rather than trying to like find wriggle room to prevent it happening. I think that just lead to disquiet and like more anger. And ultimately, if you want the person who's having this role to have their wairua and mana respected, then going through a process that actually this comes to a final ending where there is less community disquiet about it is ultimately better than going through a process where like it angers a whole lot of people and so on. Yeah. Although it might be trickier to go through,
Thank you, Aaron. What a valuable perspective you've brought to the discussion today. We really appreciate the time you've taken and bringing your life experience and your expertise to the table.
Cool.
So, thank you so much for coming and
Pleasure.
for your
Thank you.
submission. Cheers. So that brings us to the end of our hearings. That's what I meant by the end of the day, by the way, Aaron. I know it's only the end of the morning. I haven't gone crazy, don't worry. So we'll just do our closing karakia and then we'll close off for lunch. Kia tau ngā manakitanga ki runga I a tātou katoa, kia hua ai te mākihikihi e ki ana. Kia toi te kupu, kia toi te reo, kia toi te wairua, kia tau te Māori, ki roto I a mātou mahi katoa I tēnei rā. Haumia hui e, tāere ki e. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. What an interesting morning.